Hello Perception Trainers people, and welcome back to another video. So this video is a follow-up and a deeper dive into what we talked about in the last video, which was why shame and guilt are always lies. So if you have not done so already, please go and watch that video first. All right, that's foundational information for what I'm going to talk about in this video. And now, in this video, the first thing that I'm going to say is I'm going to be able to tell if you didn't actually listen to the video. If you didn't listen to the last video, if you didn't listen to this video, and if you are going to make an argument that is clear that you didn't actually, like I say, watch or listen to this video and you just got triggered by the title, I'm just going to delete those comments, all right? Because I want to have an intelligent discussion about this, and if you're not even listening to what I'm saying, we can't have an intelligent discussion. So I'm open to talking to anyone who's actually listened to this and has some intelligent things to offer, but if you're just feeling triggered by the title and want to give me your opinion on what you think I'm going to say, I'm just going to delete those comments. Okay, so moving forward, the biggest thing that I really want to get across in these videos about why shame and guilt are something we need to evolve past is that this is not an argument for moral relativism, okay? And again, the fact that we think that without guilt and shame, without man-made feelings of feeling terrible about what we're doing because someone told us to feel bad about it, which is exactly what guilt and shame are, yes? They are laws and rules, emotional states that we learned through being scolded, through being abandoned, through being rejected in our childhoods, for doing or not doing something, for being or not being something. The fact that we think that without that, there is no consequences for our behaviors, that there's nothing that would stop us from just diving into the worst of our nature, shows us how deeply disconnected we are from our true selves and from reality. Okay? Because it is a complete illusion to think that reality doesn't have consequences, all right? So this is why I am not saying that when we remove shame and guilt, we would all just be able to do whatever we want because everything's ultimately fine, right? This moral relativism argument that ultimately everything is just the universe learning about itself, ultimately there's no judgment in the universe, and therefore we can just do whatever the frick we want, and it doesn't matter, and without shame and guilt, we're all just going to run around drinking and smoking and eating bonbons and raping and pillaging and, like I say, going to the worst of our nature. That without guilt and shame, we would just devolve into chaos. This is not true. This is not what would happen. And this is because without shame and guilt, what we would actually be left with is pain and pleasure. Okay? Without shame and guilt, you can stay up all night and jump on the bed and eat Cocoa Puffs. And do that every single day. Because you're free, you're liberated. And what you're going to have when you wake up in the morning, or after a couple of days like this, is a stomach ache. You're going to be really tired. You're not going to feel good. Even if you have no story about how this is wrong or bad, or I shouldn't be doing this, or this is bad for my body, or I shouldn't blah, blah, blah. If you got rid of all shame and all guilt, and you were literally just doing this from your place of this is what I want to do, you would very quickly discover that you don't feel good doing it. You don't need someone to tell you. You do not need someone to scold you. You do not need someone to shame you or teach you or guilt you. You will learn from your own experience just with reality itself that doing these things don't feel good. You will have a direct experience with reality, and that reality will teach you something. This is what we need to understand when we say, if we got rid of shame and guilt, what we would be left with is reality. So again, yes, ultimately, all things are in alignment with the ultimate goal that seems to be consciousness wanting to learn about itself. This is why, at every moment, no matter what you're doing, and this is a hard thing, humans don't like this because we are in such this state of shame and guilt that we want to create these moral hierarchies, and we feel that we need these rules and these laws for what makes a good person and what makes a bad person so that we know how to compare ourselves against each other. Am I good compared to them? Am I bad compared to them? We have this kind of pecking order, and we don't like this idea that I'm about to share because it erases that. But here's the ultimate truth. That yes, ultimately, we all have access to unconditional love because ultimately, simply by being alive, we are teaching the universe something about itself. It's rigged. You cannot be alive and not be having an experience, including being in a coma. You're not even aware of the experience you're having. That's still an experience. That's feeding information back to consciousness. Consciousness is learning about its own self, its 3D reality structure, whatever this universe is that we're living in, through whatever you do. Whether you are breaking yourself against the structure, you are complete chaos on this planet. You are what humans would consider the worst of the worst. You are still teaching consciousness something about itself in this impermanent hologram of a reality. And therefore, ultimately, we can't be out of alignment. We have access to this unconditional love, unconditional joy, unconditional feeling good. Because, ultimately speaking, we can't actually be out of alignment. In that, we cannot not be having an experience that's feeding information back to consciousness, that consciousness as a whole is learning something about itself through your behavior. You can't not be making choices. You can't not be having an experience. And therefore, you have access to unconditional love. You can sit on your bed for the rest of your life and smoke cigarettes and watch TV and feel good about yourself. Because, ultimately, you're having an experience and the universe is going to learn that is not how the ultimate expression happens. Okay? So there's ultimate reality, and that is a part of this. But this does not negate relative reality. This does not erase relative reality. This does not get rid of relative reality, which states that you are an individual having an individual experience here on this planet. And like I say, we can all observe that in our world that we live in, there are laws. There is a structure to how this universe works. And no man and no woman, no being, no anything can break those laws and get any result other than destruction of the self. Meaning, you cannot jump off a cliff and flap your arms and expect to fly. Doesn't matter how much you visualize it, doesn't matter how much you can feel it, doesn't matter how much you have elevated your person so that you feel that you should be able to do this. No one's defying gravity. We haven't seen it. I know there are stories of Indians who can levitate and all this, or of people who are enlightened who in India or other places in the world have transcended these laws. Okay. Most of us have never seen that. We can say that, and again, even that would be, they are following some sort of law. They are living in alignment with some sort of law that we just currently don't understand. And so to the degree that we are able to understand, There are laws to this universe. It is consistent. Math is consistent. It is what it is. It's always like that. There is consistency to the structure of this universe. If you hold the ball and you drop it, it is going to fall to the ground. We can predict that. There are laws. And there is a structure to who and what you are. And this is what we're talking about in all of these videos. That there are certain aspects of you that are here to express in certain ways. And when those parts of you don't get to express, it is like a seed that doesn't get watered. It is like a seed that is planted but doesn't get the nutrients it needs. It doesn't grow properly. It rots. It ferments. It expresses in pain. And this is not because it's a bad seed. This is not because there's something fundamentally wrong with the seed. It's because the seed did not get what it needed to grow into the tree that it was meant to grow into. And so, again, and I know that this is difficult for everyone to understand. People, we don't generally think in systems. We don't think big picture. We have a hard time with these concepts, that there's a structure to how reality works, and that when we oppose the structure, we break ourselves. We cause chaos. That is what destruction is. There's an autopsy process going on. We're taking things apart by not following the structure. And so when we bring this back to a conversation about shame and guilt, when we eat foods that do not serve our body, it doesn't matter how positive we are about it, how positively intentioned we are about it, those foods are not going to nourish our body. Foods that do not contain the nutrients that our bodies need are not going to nourish our body. McDonald's is never going to lead you to the health that eating a whole foods diet is going to lead you to. There's a structure. It doesn't matter, again, how positively you think about McDonald's. And I know that there are people out there who really think that you can just positively think your way into it and then you can eat nothing but chocolate cake and be healthy. Again, we don't see these people. It doesn't exist. These people might have robust genetics and be getting away with it a little bit, but they don't live into their old age in perfect health. They degrade. People, again, can live a long time because of surgery and medicine, but that doesn't mean that they're thriving, that they're having health. There's a big difference between surviving and health. But anyways, that's another conversation. The point being, there is a reality. There is a system. And we have long-term overarching consequences of our actions. And again, this freaks people out because it means that we have to be responsible. It means that we have to think in systems. We can't just think this equals this. Life is complicated. But ultimately speaking, like I'm saying, there are negative consequences to every single one of our actions that are being taken outside of the laws and the structure of our reality. So when we go and do something, like I say, like eat Cocoa Puffs and jump on the bed all night, if we don't have any story about how that's bad, we've never heard that Cocoa Puffs are bad for you. No one ever taught us that. We have no construct in our mind about healthy or unhealthy food. We have no construct in our mind about this is how many hours of sleep you need. We'd never been indoctrinated into that. No one shamed us, no one blamed us, no one guilted us. We could put someone in that situation and they will get some pleasure from doing that. Absolutely. There will be pleasure. It's fun. That's neurochemicals. It's, right, the fats, sugar, salt, driving your brain crazy and jumping on the bed. That's so fun. Oh my gosh, wow. You have a high. But then, like I said, on the other side of that high, there's going to be a crash. There's going to be pain. There's going to be, in real reality, without any human intervention, a consequence, a painful consequence to that action. because it opposes the structure of life. It opposes the structure of your body. And therefore, there will be pain. And it is like this with absolutely everything that we do. Every little piece of our lives is going to give us a feedback of pleasure or pain. And where it gets complicated is in two ways. Number one, our pain and pleasure circuits are all messed up because of consensus reality, because of shame and guilt. In our childhoods, with our caregivers who also don't understand the structure, who don't know how reality works, who have stories in their mind about what is right and what is wrong, that is out of alignment with truth, that thought they needed to shame and guilt and blame us for our behaviors because there's no possible way we could learn from reality. Because they didn't learn how to learn from reality, from pain and pleasure. We got our wires crossed, meaning we were fully and completely dependent upon our parents. And again, I'm talking about this so often. You can watch, again, the videos I've linked below, the nervous system video. We are, as children, completely dependent on our parents for everything. Meaning, when their love went away, when we felt them pull away from us, shame us, blame us, guilt us, this activated our nervous system that we were going to die. And the only thing we had control over as children was our own behavior. We could not convince mom and dad that painting is good if they thought you can't be an artist, you have to be a lawyer. If we got shamed for being an artist, if we got shamed for being an introvert, if we got shamed for being loud, if we got shamed for wanting to express in this way, that's now wired into our nervous system as something that's going to be hindering our survival. It's going to feel like death to do that now in our adulthood. Not because it's actually out of alignment with who we are. Not because it's out of alignment with reality and what would actually support us. Because it's out of alignment with what we learned in our childhoods during that temporary reality where our parents were overriding reality. Again, we could not be responsible for getting our own needs met, for living in alignment with reality as children, for feeding ourselves and cleaning ourselves and doing these things we need to do for base things for survival. We couldn't do those things for ourselves. Our parents were our codependents in our childhood. They were overriding reality, overriding the consequences of reality in many ways, to give us survival where we would not have survived on our own. They saved us from a lot of things that we would have done, right? And learned the hard way, but the lesson would have been too great and we would have destroyed ourselves because we just had such little understanding. Falling into a fire, falling off cliffs, things that they protected us from because we didn't know. And learning it through experience would have been detrimental to us. Okay, so that stuff needed to happen. But then alongside that, the guilt and the shame, when a small child hit another child, instead of being given the opportunity to feel how that felt, to tune into the consequences of real reality, not being shamed, not being guilted. How does it feel to look at this other kid who's crying now that you hit them? That small child would be able to tune into their feelings and say, it doesn't feel good. I don't want to do that. Now, then a loving parent could say, okay, let's share. Let's learn how to be gentle with the other child. That child would see the other child smiling. And they would say, how does that feel? And the child would feel good about that. And then the child would naturally learn through experience of pain and pleasure which one feels good, which one feels bad. And they're going to choose to be nice because that feels better. Real reality would have taught them that lesson. But when we get shamed and blamed, what this does is it actually covers up real reality. It blocks us from seeing the truth of the situation. It cuts us off from our feelings because now we're in a state of survival threat. And this totally messes us up. This shame and guilt cuts us off from real reality, puts a barrier between us and reality. So now we're starting to try to memorize rules and memorize laws that mom and dad just told us because I don't want to die and I don't want their love to go away, because if their love goes away, I die. And now our pain and pleasure signals are no longer our guide. We are now one step removed from reality, and we're going down into consensus reality, which is I just need to memorize what everyone around me thinks and feels is right because I couldn't possibly know. We start to lose our connection to ourselves and our true wisdom, our capacity to learn from this feels good, let's keep doing that, this feels bad, let's not do that, because of human rules. And if we look at our society, I think most of us can take a step back and say, yeah, it's not functioning very well. We have a lot of problems with a lot of people doing a lot of self and externally destructive things. Why? Because we're disconnected from ourselves and we're disconnected from reality. And we learn that in our childhoods, partly because of shame and guilt. So this is the first thing. Understanding that at first, if we take shame and guilt away, there is going to be a phase where we feel like we can just do frickin' anything, where we feel liberated to just do whatever we want, right? Anyone who's been on a diet, who then liberates themselves from that diet, knows the feeling of I'm just going to go and eat all the cake, I'm just going to go and eat all the burgers, I'm just going to eat whatever the frick I want. And it feels like liberation to do that, right? You take off the rules, mom and dad go away, you take the car, you spend all the money, you do whatever you want, you make all this destruction. That feels like freedom for a second. That's true. But then you get the stomach ache. But then the car is broken. But then you don't have money. There are consequences to your actions that even if no human were on the planet, you were just here by yourself, you would be experiencing the pain of your actions because it operates outside the laws of reality. And now, because of shame and guilt, we all have an association with pain, the messenger that's just telling us this is out of alignment with reality. This pain is now associated with death. This pain is associated with I am fundamentally unworthy of love. There is something fundamentally flawed about me. If I'm experiencing pain, if I'm getting rejected for the things that bring me pleasure, if I'm getting rejected and abandoned and scolded for the things that bring me pain, which is what happens when we're children, again, our wires now get all crossed. And we get into this situation where pain now puts us into nervous system shutdown because it means something about our fundamental worth and value. It's no longer, oh, I'm in pain. This means I did something out of alignment with reality. What did I do that's out of alignment with reality? And it's just that. It's I'm in pain and I'm going to get in trouble. I'm in pain and mom and dad pulled away. I'm in pain and mom and dad yelled at me. I got shamed, I got blamed, I got guilted. This now makes it a much bigger deal. And a deal we can't learn from. Because what do we understand about the human nervous system? We cannot learn when we are in a state of fear. When we are in a state of nervous system shutdown, love is going away, I'm getting scolded, mom and dad are pulling out. They are my gods. I rely on them for survival. If they pull out, I don't have what I need. When we get into that state, we cannot learn, we cannot change, we cannot grow, we cannot evolve. We can only do what we've always done. Our nervous system takes over and it makes us do what we've always done. So when we're in a state of shame and guilt, thinking that this shame and guilt is going to be the thing that motivates us to be different, that if we don't have shame and guilt, we're all just going to descend to our lower nature. The opposite is true. The more we are in shame and guilt, the more we are re-traumatizing ourselves, putting ourselves in this childlike state that says, Mom, Dad's love is going to go away and I'm going to die. We don't think these thoughts. This is programmed into our nervous system. But when we do something bad and we have shame and guilt, we are in a state of fear. And from a state of fear, it doesn't matter how much you try and be different. And I think every addict, every abusive person, every person who's ever had a self-abusive or an externally abusive behavior will be able to tell you, you can't fundamentally shift your way of being. You might get a new addiction. You might stop drinking and become a food addict. You might stop being a food addict but become a sex addict. You might swap the things that you're doing. You might shift your behaviors around, become a people pleaser, drive yourself into the ground becoming a workaholic, become more socially acceptably addicted, or more socially acceptably self-abusive, but you didn't actually heal. You didn't actually become a higher version of yourself who doesn't need to self-abuse because you're in a state of fear. You didn't evolve because you couldn't evolve, because you couldn't get more information. You see? So now, here's the real truth. When we start to let go of shame and guilt, and we go through that rebellious phase where I'm just going to do whatever the frick I want, what we really want to be doing here is, again, developing this deep sense of self-love, that I am worthy of love and safety no matter what I'm doing, because this is the key. This is what we're all so afraid of. We are all terrified that if we love ourselves for who and what we are right now, if we give ourselves permission to have unconditional love, let go of the shame, let go of the guilt, all the stories that are telling us there's something fundamentally wrong with us, that we're just going to stay an addict forever, that we're just going to stay abusive forever, that the rapists and the pedophiles and the murderers are just going to, if we unconditionally love these people who are doing these horrible things, we're just giving them permission to be like this forever. And that, what kind of world is that? No, that is not what will happen. When a human being is finally in a state of love, accepted for who and what we are right here, right now, we shift our nervous systems from that red lockdown, I can only do what I've always done. I can only repeat this pattern. I don't have the capacity to take in any more information to know anything else. I'm just going to repeat, repeat, repeat. We shift from that into a state of nervous system relaxation. And that's just how we're wired. Human beings, because of the way that we're raised, love equals safety. Safety equals expanded consciousness. Rejection, shame, guilt, blame equals fear, equals shut down, just do what I've always done. Narrow focus, don't look at the bigger picture, don't take in any more information, just do whatever you need to do to survive. Same action over and over. I feel this way, I drink. I feel this way, I drink. I feel this way, I drink. I feel this way, I hit my wife. I feel this way, I hit my wife. I feel this way, I hit my wife. It's just over and over and over again. These shame stories that we learned in our childhoods that developed into adult behaviors. I'm sexually suppressed, I rape people. I've been told all my life I'm not allowed to be this, I'm not allowed to do this. It's a natural process for a human. That's what happens. So, like I say, when we unconditionally love ourselves for who and what we are in our most destructive stuff, we are going to learn that there is pain and pleasure in what we are doing. The things that we're addicted to, the destructive behaviors that we're engaged in, they give us some pleasure and they give us some pain. So what does that tell us? It tells us that we are humans who have needs. And the pleasure part tells us what part of the need we have that is getting met through our current behavior. This is why we're addicted to it. This is why we do what we do that's so obviously self or externally destructive, and we can't stop ourselves. Because the behavior is meeting a need that we were shamed and guilted out of even discovering in our childhoods. Because again, the seeds for all of the crazy shit we do in adulthood, the seeds for rape, the seeds for murder, the seeds for addiction, the seeds for all of these things that we think are horrible, start in our childhoods. When we wanted to express in a certain way, we had a need, we had a desire that would have been fine, that would have been healthy. Sexual desires, desires for expression and creativity, and going through that dominance phase and all of these things. We were going through a phase where we needed to learn something higher. So rather than learning, we had to go through I'm the child and there's nothing but me, I want to be dominant. And then we evolve from dominance into co-cooperation because co-cooperation feels better than dominance. This is what we would discover. But we weren't allowed to go through that phase. We're stuck in dominance. We got stuck in the shame and guilt in dominance. We got shamed instead of learning. We didn't get to grow. We're stuck there. Now we're adults who want to dominate. The seed was there. We're rapists. Our love map got messed up. There was trauma. We didn't get the love and the affection and the physical touch that we needed. We never learned, again, how to connect with ourselves, to connect with our need for love, to connect with our need for connection, to learn how to find that in a healthy way. There was all this shame and guilt and suppression and trauma. Perhaps we were sexually abused. These things happen, that in these seeds, it leads to that. There's no such thing as anyone who's doing something destructive or chaotic, who had a beautiful childhood, had got all their needs met, is completely connected to themselves, completely connected to everyone else, and is just doing this anyways. That's not what happened. These things are rooted in trauma. You weren't allowed to be yourself. And now you have an addictive behavior that helps you every single time you're about to be something that you got shamed and blamed for in your childhood. You do your addictive behavior and it shuts you down. Right? So it may not be that drinking gets you love, obviously, but it stops you from being the person that got shamed in your childhoods, which is safer. It's actually safer to be the alcoholic than it is to be the artist that your parents rejected. That was wired into your nervous system as a child. The rejection you get from being an alcoholic is mixed with a whole bunch of acceptance of partying and people liking you and you being around people and all these things, and it's a break from your life. There's pleasure in that. You see? So what we're going to discover again is that in all of our terrible, shameful behaviors, there's a positive intention. We're getting something out of it. It's meeting a need on some level that we are not allowing ourselves to meet in any other way, that we may not even be aware of. So we need to look at what is the pleasure in this so horrible situation, this so horrible thing that I'm doing. If I let go of the shame and the guilt, what am I getting out of this? That's the first step, self-love. What is the positive benefit? And then the pain part, again, when we take the shame away from it, when we stop saying, yeah, but there's pain and it's bad and look what I'm doing this is clearly means that I'm a terrible person. That just drives us into nervous system shutdown. And again, we won't be able to change. We won't be able to see anything else or do anything else. We're just going to do what we've always done because the shame is too deep. That shame drives us into repeating our patterns because we can't do anything else when we're in that state of shame because it's putting us into such a state of fear. Lockdown that we can't change. And this is just how our nervous systems work. When we take the shame away from pain, the painful consequences that we're going to observe every time we're doing something that's out of alignment with reality, which are always going to be there, we can start to say, so in what ways is this behavior not meeting my need? In what ways is this behavior not serving the purpose? That pain is letting me know that there are, the pleasure is saying these are the things in which this action or behavior is meeting the need that I have. And the pain is saying, and these are the ways it's not. And if I can start to say, okay, well, if the pain is coming from this and this and this, how can I get this need met? That I must admit to myself, I have this need. This is why I'm doing this. I'm addicted, I'm doing these destructive behaviors because I have a need that I don't know how to get met any other way. And in this state of love and safety, we will be able to expand our consciousness, expand our awareness, expand to see that there are higher, better ways to get this need met. When we get rid of the guilt and shame, we're going to be able to say, okay, well, this is just who I am. I'm an artist. I'm this person. I went through these traumas. I didn't get the love that I needed. I didn't get the acceptance that I needed. I didn't get the approval that I needed. So how can I start to get these needs met now? And admit them to myself, right? This is why this is such a complicated process. Because, again, we are all acting the way we are acting. These shameful, horrible things that we think are shameful and horrible. Because society in general doesn't understand how humanity works. Society in general has rejected parts of the human experience as bad and wrong and evil that are not. And then because of that, we have these parts of ourselves that get shadowed, and then they act in ways that seem wrong and bad and terrible, and this reinforces our idea that this thing that I have is bad. When it's not. It's just being expressed unhealthfully because it's being suppressed, it's being shamed, it's being denied. It's not being allowed to grow into its healthy expression. So again, when anyone comes to me and says, well, if we don't have shame and guilt, then the murderers and the rapists and the sociopaths, okay, well, first of all, again, these people are deeply traumatized. They are already in a deep state of shame and guilt. That's why they're doing what they're doing. Their brains are so overwhelmed with, I am a terrible, horrible, awful person. Love got so cut off. Pleasure and pain signals got so messed up that they're completely disconnected from themselves and disconnected from reality. They're not bad, wrong, terrible, horrible human beings. They are deeply traumatized human beings. They were either over-rescued and never had to feel the consequences of their behaviors. That's definitely a thing. Privileged people who never felt the pain of hurting another person or whatever because mom and dad always cleaned up their mess. They don't have a connection to the destruction that they're causing on the planet. They still don't need shame and guilt. They just need someone to stop covering for them. Someone to stop cleaning up their messes for them. They need to see for themselves the consequences of their behaviors. And then they will change if there's no shame and guilt involved. Because it won't feel good. And then on the other side, the people that just got so shamed and so blamed and so guilted and have so much shame and toxic shame and blame. They're in such a state of shutdown that, of course, it all feels bad. Their one release is that thing they do. It's this partial meeting of a need where everything else got shut down and traumatized and guilted and has all these associations with rejection and fear that they don't know anymore what's right and wrong. This is what this is. We're completely disconnected. And then ultimately, those people are such a small part of the population that that's not what we're talking about here. If you're watching this video, you're not one of those people. You're a person who got traumatized and you have some self-destructive behaviors. And just put this for yourself. You need to learn to love yourself into a state of safety. And then you're going to discover that who and what you want to be and express and all these things is going to feel like death to you. Of course, because you got shamed and blamed and guilted about it in your childhood. So you're coping with an addiction, with a self-sabotaging behavior, with something that you're doing that hurts yourself and others. That's your way of not doing what mom and dad didn't want you to do or trying to cope with being what they wanted you to be. You're not connected to pleasure and pain. You're connected to stories. And it's blocking you from seeing reality. This is where we're at as a humanity. So letting go of shame and guilt for 99.99% of the people is going to lead to an existential crisis where I don't know how to know what to do. I don't know what's right and wrong now. If I let go of shame and guilt, if I let go of the rules, I just feel all this nervous system craziness, and it's not simple. You're going to feel dark night of the soul. You're going to feel completely lost, out to sea. Yeah. And if you move through that, if you work through it, you're going to see that there are lots of parts of yourself that are immature and that need to hit another kid, right? The dominance thing. But you need to observe the actual consequences of your behaviors that you didn't get to learn in your childhood, that was robbed of you because of shame and guilt. And now you need to be able to observe the effects of the consequences of your reality, the consequences of your choices. And from a self-loving place, just really say, how did this equal pleasure and how did this equal pain? We really start to reconnect with our pleasure and our pain. And then without the stories of pleasure and pain, meaning there's something wrong and bad about you fundamentally, when you can feel safe enough to say, okay, I'm in pain, I'm causing destruction, yes, but I'm still a good person. I'm still worthy of love. That is when you will be able to change. When we tell ourselves, I'm causing myself or other people pain, and that makes me awful, that's when we hide, that's when we lie, that's when we cheat, that's when we sneak around it, that's when we are never able to change. We deny. I've literally seen people whose shame and guilt are so deep that they will rewrite reality for themselves, actually change the events in their memory of what happened, because they cannot accept that what they did caused pain, because that would mean so much shame and guilt that they don't know how to deal with, that their brains literally amnesia it. That is because of shame and guilt. That is not in spite of shame and guilt. Shame and guilt makes it so that we literally will rewrite our own histories for ourselves to protect ourselves from having to admit the consequences of our actions. Because it's not just the consequences of our actions that we're admitting. We're admitting to being a fundamentally horrible person if we admit to these consequences. And that is never true. It's like when the mom lifts a car and then doesn't feel that like she broke all the bones in her body for a little bit. Your body literally protects you from the consequences of that action because the pain would be so bad that it just numbs you out. People are doing that mentally because shame and guilt are so heavy that they just whitewash their lives and forget the things that they have done. Cannot admit, cannot own up to it. Gaslight, pretend it didn't happen, because the shame and the guilt would be too deep, it would destroy them. This is what we need to start to understand about ourselves. Shame and guilt is not working. It is not making a better humanity. It's causing us to not be able to change. It's putting us into nervous system shutdown. Red, which means we just do the same things over and over and over again. We're passing trauma on from generation to generation to generation. So my message here is, yeah, it's complicated. And when you first start to get into this with yourself, there's going to be all this fear that you're going to just be a horrible, terrible person. That if you really let yourself just be what you are and accept who you are and stop with the shame and the guilt, you don't feel like you have a moral compass at all, because you're so disconnected from yourself and you're so disconnected from real reality. And there's all these stories about what's right and wrong and good and bad and what you should feel good about and what's going to kill you and what's not going to kill you based on, again, the temporary reality of your childhood, where fitting into what your parents wanted you to be was survival. It's not just what you think. It's literally in your nervous system. So you starting to say, well, maybe I want to express in this way, or I want to do this thing. It's going to feel like death in your nervous system. And so you're not going to know, is that because it's wrong and that's pain and that's reality telling me I shouldn't be that way? Or that's my conditioning telling me I shouldn't be that way? And the way you're going to find out is by doing it. and seeing, do I die? What are the actual consequences of this? In my adulthood, when I hit someone else, what are the consequences? In my adulthood, when I paint, what are the consequences in real reality? And it's scary a little bit that some of us have to learn these things that we should have learned when we were essentially harmless at 2 and 3 and 4 years old, right? If we had all been able to learn that dominating others and hitting others doesn't feel good at 2 and 3, we wouldn't have to go through it as 50-year-olds with frickin' guns. But that's where we're at. We stunted ourselves. So we have all these 50-year-olds walking around with a 2-year-old part of themselves who still doesn't know in reality that dominating another isn't right. Not in real reality. Because the pain they feel and the shame they feel, they cover it up. They drink it away. They go and they hunt and then they drink a beer and then they go with their friends. They don't have to feel the pain of it. We're disconnected. We're all traumatized children. So when we take off the shame and the guilt, again, we're going to get to these parts of ourselves that have no idea what's going on, that are in chaos, that are half pleasure, half pain. And we slowly work our way to just feeling it for how it is, letting go of the stories, very, very slowly, mindfully, teaching ourselves how to feel without the story of what this feeling means, so that we can eventually get to what reality is actually trying to tell us. We let go of the story not because there isn't a story, not because pain and pleasure are an illusion. They're not. They're just confusing to us because our wires are crossed. And then so more than this, with our children, we need to start to understand that reality will teach our children. That if we are there as parents, we're there to help them learn from reality, to help them learn from their pain, to help them learn from their pleasure. What felt good about that? What didn't feel good about that? What did you want to express? What did you not want to express? Stop forcing our kids to be certain ways. Let them grow. And of course, they need challenge. They need to do things that are scary. And we support them in that. Again, it's not about like every time your child doesn't want to go outside, you don't make them. It's more complicated than that. And that's why, again, we just want shame and guilt. Because it's easier. It's simpler. It makes this complicated mess of maybe we don't understand what's actually right and wrong go away. It's just rules. We just want these black and white, simple rules. Because we feel that without them, we could never figure it out. That's why we're holding on to this. We need to evolve past this. That life is more complicated. Pain and pleasure will teach us. And it's going to teach us that life is more complicated than we think it is. We as human beings are more complicated than we think we are. There's always a positive intention in everything that we're doing. And then the pain is showing us where we're not quite getting the need met. And then we can use that pain when we let go of the shame and the guilt that this pain means there's something wrong and bad about me. When we let that go, we can start to expand into what is this pain actually telling me? I'm breaking myself against reality in certain ways. So what's the rest of the need that's not getting met? And how can I meet it in a higher, more evolved, more complex way? That's what this is. We don't stop being an alcoholic. We start being someone who can have boundaries in our relationships, who can express the way we want to express, who stops working the job we hate and starts working the job we like. We don't become not something. We evolve what we are. We don't become not a rapist. We deal with all the trauma around the sexuality and the desires and the need and the connection and the closeness and the dominance and all these things we never got to learn. And again, this is not about saying these behaviors are okay and we all just need to love these people. Of course, there are some people who might be too far gone. I'm not making an argument for that. The extreme cases of sociopaths and, like I say, serial murderers and rapists for their entire lives, these severely damaged people, Shame and guilt is not going to be the thing that changes them. So we need to let that go. And shame and guilt is not going to be the thing that protects us from becoming like them. They are like that in part because of shame and guilt. So again, what am I saying? That we should just let them go and do their thing? No, of course not. But let's focus on ourselves. Let's focus on the next generation. Let's not repeat these patterns that caused these people to be this way through shame and guilt and not understanding ourselves. And we need to say, okay, well, what kind of need did that rapist not get met? What kind of trauma did those murderers go through? And let's not pass that on to the next generation. We need to start thinking critically. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not going to have any unintelligent conversations about this. This is a big, complex issue about what do we need to do differently, because this shame and guilt thing is not working. How can we, as normal society, not the extremes, because you're not the extreme watching this video. You're a normal person who has normal shame and guilt, who has normal destructive tendencies within the range of normal. How can you love yourself through this so that you can start to learn from real reality? Giving yourself permission to have love for yourself, to love your traumatized nervous system that's going to tell you, no, I can't be this way and I can't do that. Because in my childhood, that meant death. Yeah. And being willing to love yourself for who and what you are and experiment with what are the actual consequences of my behaviors. Not from people's opinions, but in real reality. And again, that's complicated. It's going to be complicated. Consensus reality is very complicated. You might get really rejected by people. But are you punished by pain in reality when you paint? Probably not. These are the things you're going to realize. You're going to have to set boundaries with people, and they're not going to like it, but it's going to bring more order to your life. So in real reality, not consensus reality, real reality, there was positive benefit. And we start to step out of this human-centric model, that humans have it figured out and we just need to fit into what humans think is right, and to say, I'm going to go out on my own and I'm going to find it from real reality. I'm going to find real pain and real pleasure. And I'm going to work through, is this real pain or is this consensus reality pain? Is this real pleasure or is this consensus reality pleasure? And it's complicated and it's hard and it's confusing and you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And again, that's why I know we just want to hang on to shame and guilt. And again, these big cases of the rapists and the murderers, and we say, well, what do we do about that? Okay, well, if you have had experience with these people, you need to love yourself. Don't worry about them. Don't worry about what it meant for them. For a little bit, you need to get your needs met. You need to heal your traumas. You need to focus on yourself and what you didn't get and how you were traumatized. That's your main priority. Don't worry about them. And if you're raising children, how can you support your kids without shame and guilt? How can you take the shame and guilt out of pain? And say, okay, well, what happened there? What can we learn? Making learning safe. Making not knowing safe. These are huge things we need to do to shift reality as normal people. This is what we need to focus on. Don't make it about the extremes. That's a scapegoat, because the extremes are a small part of your life. You and your shame and your guilt are a big part of your life. Deal with the things that are actually pertinent to your big life. Okay? Because I know murder, rape, pedophilia, these are big problems. Let's look at that as traumatized people. How do we not be traumatized? How do we not traumatize the next generation? How do we step out of this shame and guilt complex so that we can go through all the complicated mess of learning from reality? And I have lots of videos to help you with that. Your pain and your pleasure feelings are going to guide you. The Emotional Master Series. Come join the Mystery School. This is not simple work and it's not for everyone. So if this is all just very too overwhelming for you, that's okay. This work just isn't for you right now. That's allowed. But for those of us who want to evolve past shame and guilt, who want to become something higher than that, who want to learn from real reality, become evolved. We don't need shame and guilt to know not to eat Cocoa Puffs and jump on the bed all night. We don't want to do it because it doesn't feel good. This is, again, getting to this place of like, you don't need discipline to eat healthy. When you take away the shame and the guilt, no stories about it, you're going to eventually get to a place where you want to eat healthy because it will feel better, and you will work through the things you're covering up with food and the things you're running away from and the coping mechanism that food is for your life. So much of the time we're eating not because of anything with food. We're eating because we don't want to be in the relationship we're in. We're eating because we don't want to have the job we're having. We're trying to be something we're not. We're trying not to be something we are. And when we start to deal with all of that, the food thing just fits into place. The not needing to drink anymore just fits into place because it doesn't feel good anymore. We have a better way of meeting our need. But it's scary to get through that. It's hard. So that's what I'm saying. This is not easy. This is not simple. This is not simple. This is very complex. But it is what it is. We need to evolve. We need to live in a world where we're capable of starting to understand that our pain means that we're breaking ourselves against reality. And that's not because we're wrong and bad and horrible and should feel guilty. We have a need that's not being met. So what can we learn about ourselves? What can we learn about reality? And it doesn't mean we can't ever get the need met. It means we just need to discover a new way. So this is what this is about. When we love ourselves, we're going to get confused. We're going to get all these questions. We're going to just want the rule book back. I get it. But the rule book isn't serving us. It's traumatizing us over and over and over again. So this is an evolution. It's not moral relativism. It's what's really chaos in real reality. What causes real pain? What's really constructive in real reality? What causes real pleasure? Not consensus reality, pain, and pleasure. How can I live in alignment with truth? That doesn't matter what the opinions of people are. Is it really true in real reality? That's all that matters. Because again, as much as we want to consensus reality ourselves, it doesn't matter how much everyone believes that jumping off a cliff is good for you. If we all believe it and we all agree, we're all still going to hurt ourselves when we jump off the cliff. Because reality doesn't care about human opinion. Reality doesn't care about consensus reality. Reality doesn't care what you were taught in your childhood. It doesn't change. It's consistent. The laws don't change for us because we were taught something wrong. We just keep breaking ourselves against the laws. So in our adulthoods, we have to take responsibility for our pain and say, it's not shame and guilt that's going to get me out of this. It's learning from real reality. What my parents taught me, what my caregivers taught me, what society taught me, that's out of alignment with truth. And learning to align with it even though it's going to feel horribly frightening to do so. Because it's going to be completely resisting and rebelling against your nervous system that's trying to protect you. So like I say, there's lots of things to help you with this. The awakening process, the dark night of the soul, emotional mastery, all of these things, important. You can join my mystery school. We're working through this. There's lots of people that can help you and support you because they're on this path too. If you want to evolve, you can. But it's about untangling societal expectation, pain, and pleasure from real pain and pleasure. Okay? So if you want to have a discussion about this now that you've listened to this, I'm open to that in the comments. I understand if you just want the rule book because it makes it easier and simpler. Like I say, I understand people getting triggered from this because what I'm saying is way more complicated than the rule book. And we're already so overwhelmed and feel scared and can't do it. So love yourself. If you're triggered by this, love you. I'm not telling you to get mad at yourself. It's not going to work. Don't shame and guilt yourself. Love yourself. If we all just start with loving ourselves, this world will be a very different place. Okay? So I love you. I think you're great. One step at a time. It's scary, I know, but it can be done. Real reality is there. It's not changing for us. It's always there. It's consistent. God is always there. It's consistent. All right? So I'll see you in the next video.